Um, let's go back on the record. The time is just after 2 o'clock. The time of recess for lunch and the commission agenda meeting and presentation have ended. We will return to our evidentiary hearing schedule for the Confluence Rivers general rate case increase request. This is case number WR-2023-0006. That's 3 zeros and a 6 to clarify. And we are at staff's opening statement. If staff would like to come up to the podium, please.
Good afternoon. May it please the commission. Mr. Woodsmall has always been a hard act to follow, so I'm not even going to try. A lot of the stuff that he said about the big picture was absolutely true. There are a lot of decrepit and distressed water and sewer systems in the state of Missouri, and there's no question that perhaps the best and most effective way to rehabilitate them is to have them be acquired by a company that has the resources to fix them. But if Confluence was as angelic as Mr. Woodsmall's opening made it seem, we wouldn't be here today because nobody would be quarreling with their rate request. So Mr. Woodsmall's opening was compelling and passionate, but you see compelling and you see passionate on TV every night. But you don't necessarily believe that what those actors are saying is the truth. And I'm sure I don't have to warn you that you shouldn't believe everything a lawyer tells you. So turning now to staff's position in this case. The reconciliation filed on Tuesday showed that the company who filed their case December 21, 2022, was seeking $2,438,975 in additional rate revenue. Staff, prior to today, was willing to give them $931,000. That figure now has changed to $1.2 million as part of the settlement of the 11 issues we've settled. That's 49% of their request. That difference of 1.2 million is the reason we're here. That's what we're fighting about. That figure represents the cumulative total of staff's adjustments. The way one of these cases works is the company files tariffs describing a general rate increase that triggers an audit by the staff, similar to an audit by the IRS. They want to go in and they want to look at everything. They want to look at the general ledger and see what the entries are under each category. And then they want to see the documents that evidence those transactions, right? Because it's easy to write a number in a ledger, but staff wants to trace them to the transactional documents to see if those transactions actually occurred, to see if those transactions were actually Missouri transactions. You know, when you have a utility that operates in a number of different jurisdictions, you have to know where the transactions live, what's their home, what ratepayers should be paying for them. Certainly Missouri ratepayers should not be paying for transactions that pertain to Kansas or can pertain to Kentucky. So there's another issue in the audit. Additionally, staff looks to see if each transaction was reasonable, was necessary, was prudent, was beneficial to the ratepayers. Those are the tests that are applied in determining what figures should be put into rates and what figures should be disallowed. Reasonable means that the amount paid was rational under all the circumstances for what was obtained with the payment. In other words, did they overpay? Necessary means without it, utility service could not be provided. Prudent. Was it an expenditure that a reasonable person, knowing what they knew or should have known, would have made? Or was it a risky or reckless expenditure? Finally, beneficial to the ratepayers. Who gets the benefit of that expenditure? A classic example of that is the kind of advertising you see from a lot of utilities that are intended to show you what a wonderful citizen they are, what a great neighbor they are in your community, all the good they do. Well, that's not necessary to the delivery of utility services. Why should the ratepayers pay for that? Sometimes an audit takes about 4 months, that's the standard, and sometimes it takes longer. It takes longer when a company's accounts are in disarray, when explanations and corrections are not forthcoming, when responses to data requests are incomplete, and when the company has not complied with the uniform system of accounts. That was the case here. We found their financial records to be, frankly, a mess, and that delayed the audit and caused unending frustration among the auditors. And there were quite a few discovery conferences and requests for discovery orders, quite a few more than you see in a typical rate case. The very first issue you will hear today, recommended reports, is directed toward that problem. This isn't a question of money. This is a question of information. Remember that in a rate case, the company has all the data. Without the data, staff can't do an audit. Without the data, we can't calculate how much the Missouri ratepayers should be paying. Okay, so your duty in a general rate case is to set just and reasonable prospective rates after consideration of all relevant factors. Just and reasonable rates means rates that are fair to the ratepayers and fair to the shareholders. Just and reasonable rates have been characterized as not a single penny more than is required to cover the cost of service and to offer a reasonable opportunity to realize a fair return on the shareholder's investment. There are two halves to a typical rate case. The first half is the revenue requirement. How much extra money do they really need? That's what most of the issues you're going to hear in this case are about. How much money do they get? As I mentioned, for staff, that figure is now about 1.2 million. That's how much we believe they need in terms of additional rate revenue. The major areas considered in determining the revenue requirement are the net rate base, which is the original book value of the assets that are turned to the public service, less accumulated depreciation. Under the Constitution, the shareholders are entitled to a return, as we say, of and on that investment. They get the investment back and they get interest on the value of the investment. Also considered are revenues, expenses, and the cost of capital. Now, you heard an interesting assertion by Mr. Woodsmall having to do with a $7 million debt and how they wouldn't be able to service that debt if they don't get enough money out of this case. There is an entire issue dedicated to that. It's called cost of capital. All of their debt service will be considered in the cost of capital issue, and you will have an opportunity to set a return that will service all of that debt. So that particular issue is one that should never have been raised. Cost of capital is part of this case. It's usually, although not here, the biggest single part of a rate case, and you will have ample opportunity to consider how much money they need to service their capital, which is dividends on the shares and interest on the debt. Those three issues are worth $376,000, according to the reconciliation. The rate base issues are worth $236,000. Staff has no revenue issues, and the expense issues are worth nearly $500,000. The second part of a rate case is rate design, which is how the additional revenues will be collected from the ratepayers. And you will hear tomorrow three issues having to do with rate design and district consolidation. And you heard some talk about that from Mr. Woodsmall. And tomorrow you can ask staff's witnesses, Carrie Roth, for example, why is it that staff doesn't support single tariff pricing? Why does staff think it is more equitable and more just and more reasonable to go to the cost of service model that staff has proposed? A rate case is not just about money. It's also about how a company operates. Does it employ good business practices? Are its facilities in good repair? Is it responsive to its customers? Is the water safe? Is the service adequate? In this regard, you will hear about operations and maintenance, timesheets, communications with customers, customer feedback, and several other issues. There are 15 issues remaining on the amended issues list, several with subparts, so it's actually more than 15 makes it sound. One of the issues you will hear today is income taxes, and I will speak more about that when we do the mini opening. But let me simply say that what you heard from Mr. Woodsmall with respect to net operating losses is a novel theory of net operating losses, and one which, if you swallow that and give the company what they're asking for, will provide them a double benefit for those net operating losses. You paid great attention during Mr. Woodsmall's opening. I watched you and I saw that, and that's good. And you asked many good questions afterwards. Let me just remind you that what a lawyer tells you, Mr. Woodsmall and myself, that's not evidence. You cannot support a finding of fact based on what I say or based on what Mr. Woodsmall said. You can ask those questions, and I urge you, please ask those questions of the witnesses that you're going to see in this hearing, because those witnesses are experts. Those witnesses will be under oath, and what they tell you, you can absolutely, if you believe it, base a finding of fact upon it. Thank you very much, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Are there any commissioner questions? Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Could you run through the figures that you had broken out on the current staff recommendation? You had $376,000 of cost was attributed in that figure, 336,000 and roughly, was revenue, and roughly $500,000 was expense. Did I miss one? Or is that
See, and these have not been corrected for the issues that were settled. So according to the reconciliation as filed, cost of capital, $376,786. Rate base, $236,938. Now, these figures are revenue requirement, additional revenue requirement figures. So that's the effect that category of issues has on the revenue requirement request. The expense issue is $445,636. Almost all of that is attributable to the mischaracterization of certain expenses as capital investments.
Okay, great. Thank you for repeating that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We will move to Mr. Kleiser with the Office of the Public Counsel, their opening statement.
I assume I'm ready? Okay. Thank you all. First of all, it's a good thing that we settled some of these issues because it's already been a long day and we haven't even gotten through the openings. But I'm going to endeavor to try and keep this a little bit quicker. I want to thank all of you for your patience and willingness to, listening to all this. So I want to start off by echoing something that staff counsel just said, which is that this issue, Mr. Woodsmall, during his opening, got up and he talked a very great deal about the improvements that Confluence has made to its systems. And nobody's here to dispute that. That's not what this case is about. And I agree, if we had just been focused on trying to make the company whole for those improvements, we would be done. We would be settled. We wouldn't be here. So that begs the question, what is actually driving this case? And actually, really quick, before I get into that, and specifically before I get into that handout, I just want to address a lot has been said regarding some of the capital disallowances. In my opinion, I think I can recall 4 capital disallowances I'm going to talk about really quickly. Just get them out of the way. The first is the idea of the things that were capitalized that staff is saying should be expensed, right? Now, the thing you have to understand about this is that staff has included an increase to the expenses to compensate the fact that Confluence is not capitalizing those. That means that Confluence is being made whole for all of those improvements. You take it out of capital and you put it in expense. In particular, staff has increased expense by roughly $400,000 to reflect the fact that they've taken things out of capital. So the company, all that stuff that Mr. Woodsmall got up and talked about the improvements they've made, the company is being compensated for 100% of that. It's just not a capital item, it's an expense item. And the only reason staff did that is because they looked at the uniform system of accounts, which by commission rule they're supposed to follow. And they said, the USOA tells us it's supposed to be expensed. That was all that the case is about. Second issue, that's the acquisition costs. The staff is relying on a longstanding precedent that says you don't recover acquisition costs. I'm going to go into that more in detail in the mini opening. I don't really want to get into it now. That issue is worth, I think, less than $100,000 of revenue requirement. The only 2 capital disallowances have been made by the OPC. The first is the disallowance of AMI meters, which amounts to a total of $30,000 in revenue requirement. And the other is the fire hydrants at Terre du Lac, which amounts to an issue for revenue requirement of less than $2,000. These are really small numbers. This is not the issue in front of the commission. This is not what this case is about. What is this case about? If you'll turn to the handout I've shown you or handed out, this identifies the 3 big dollar items that are actually keeping the parties apart in this case. And right off the bat, in case there's confusion, I'm going to tell you, cost of capital on here, it's listed as 430. You just heard 370, 380 from staff. That's the difference between staff and OPC cost of capital. Our cost of capital is a 430 difference. I want to make sure that was clear. Now, like I said, these aren't the only issues, but they're the biggest dollar issues. They're the ones that are really driving this case. So I want to take it just a little bit at a high level, very high level, run through each of these 3 issues. So I'm going to start with the income tax issue, which is worth about $450,000. Now, I know that a lot of people think taxes, they think, oh, it's really complicated. It's not. This is a very simple issue. And whether it's today or some other day, my opening will walk through simply in detail, explain exactly what the problem is here. But at a high level, staff in the OPC want the company to collect exactly enough money to pay their taxes. We want this company to have every dollar they need to pay taxes. The company's position is that they should collect more than what they need to pay taxes. And the excess, they should be able to put in their pocket as profit and walk away with. That's all that issue is. They want to collect $450,000 annual in extra profit as money that the company is going to collect to pay taxes and then not pay taxes. And nobody disagrees that they're not going to pay that money in taxes. And all the OPC and staff is saying is if you're not going to pay it out in taxes, you shouldn't be collecting it. That's it. It's a very reasonable position. But again, we want this company to have everything they need to pay taxes every time. So let's go to the other next issue then. Again, cost of capital, which I have on this sheet, 430. That's us, not the company. Cost of capital, multiple different components. You got your capital structure, you got your ROE, that's return on equity. I'm going to keep it real high level right now. I'm just going to talk about return on equity. In the past, this commission has used what they call the zone of reasonableness. And that test is you take 100 basis points or 1% above and below the national average, and you say, hey, is it in that zone? Okay. The documents I've seen show that the national average for water and wastewater utilities by S&P Global, I saw a document in February, it was 9.6. Document come out in May, 9.4. I'll introduce both of those during the evidentiary record. So where's our national average? I'm going to call it 9.5, right between those two, just to keep things simple. Your zone of reasonableness, the low end, 8.5. The high end, 10.5. So where are the parties? Staff's position, ROE, 9.5. Right on that national average. Dead on. Now where's the OPC's position? 9.65. We're actually over the company. And I want you to stop and consider that, because you heard Mr. Woodsmall get up here and bang his fist about how the OPC, we want to punish this company. We want them to go bankrupt. It's not true. It's just not true. We have recommended a higher ROE than the staff in this case. We are not asking for an unreasonable position. We are asking for something that is dead on in the national average. Where's the company at? 11.35. That's 185 basis points above the national average, well outside the zone of reasonableness. That's the problem here. The company is just not being reasonable with its request. There are a couple other issues in there. The capital structure is one. Again, there's a lot to it. I don't want to waste all your time. I'll get to it in the mini openings on that one. So let's move on then to probably the biggest issue here, which is OPC's disallowance for third-party contracts. Now, again, you already heard a lot about this from Confluence's opening, and I'm going to go over that. But just at a high level, I want you to explain what happened here. The company is currently spending about $1.6 million to hire third-party operators to manage its systems. And what happened is the OPC just said, hey, would it be cheaper to do this in-house? So what we did is we took a map of their systems and we tried to break out the systems into a logical grouping based on geographic location and number of systems. We didn't want any one system to have any one group to have too many systems or to be so geographically disparate that they have to drive everywhere. So we came up with 9. And we said, what would be the cost of hiring 9 people? And we came up with $600,000. It's actually slightly less than that, but we said $600,000. So we recommended $1 million disallowance as a result. Again, they're costing $1.6 million. We think they could do it for $600,000, hence $1 million disallowance. Look, at the end of the day, you might ultimately decide that it needs to be more than 9 people. I respect that. We're going to present the evidence and try to talk about what it costs to hire people, and you can come up with what the right number is. The real concern here is that the company just does not want to consider hiring third-party operators. We genuinely believe that they could significantly reduce overarching costs and save customers money. And I want to point this out. This isn't like a plant issue, right? Where if you disallow plant, the company's not going to be able to recover. It's not going to get its profit. This is an expense item. If the company finds a way to lower its expenses, there's no harm to the company. There's just benefit to the ratepayers. So figuring out if it's possible for us to get a lower expense by hiring in-party people, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I wasn't necessarily going to touch on this, but Mr. Woodsmall addressed this in his opening, and I really just want to try and touch it. I don't know if any of you have still this handout. If you do, if you could find the pages that talk about this, it's the map and this graph underneath. I have it at page 26 in the bottom left. Actually, I'm going to start on page 27. Now, there were a couple different things that were said here. One thing that I wanted to point out was, hey, look, you have 13 systems in operator number 3 and only 2 in operator number 6. Well, why is that? If you flip back a page and you look at the map, operator number 3 is a big old cluster of groups around Camdenton, around the lake. Operator number 6 is this stretched out square up here. they're in geographically disparate locations. And we said, hey, if we try and stick those in somewhere else, you're going to force somebody to drive all over the place. So this is about the best that we can do to get somebody to look at just these systems. That's why you have that separation. Now, you were also told, hey, there's 13 systems here, but let's take a close look. Let's read through the names. On the water side, you got Spring Branch, the missing well. In Camden, you've got Cedar Glen, Chelsea Rose, Cimarron Bay, Eagle Woods, or Route KK, and Cedar Green. Now you go to the other side. Well, you see the missing well, Cedar Glen, Chelsea Rose, Cimarron Bay, Eagle Woods, Route KK, Cedar Green. What you really need to realize is 13 different systems. It's actually only 7 locations. Another thing, you were told that each system had to be inspected 3 times a week. That's not true. The company only requires water systems to be checked once a week. For sewer systems, it's also once a week unless the sewer system has mechanical systems, in which case it is 3 times a week. But you immediately start to see it's not 13 systems, it's really just 7 locations. And the waters only have to be checked once. And we don't even know whether or not all those sewers require checking 3 times a week. The hours start to come down. But the real kicker, and this is where I'm afraid I might have to go in camera because, and I'm going to turn to Confluence here. I'm going to wait a second because Confluence's lawyers are conferring. I want to discuss the actual number of operators operating those systems. Now that was in a confidential DR.
I mentioned it in the data request that it's 21.
No, I meant that specific these specific systems. Okay. And again, I'm going to get into much more detail on this when it comes up. But the reality is, for 10 of those 13 systems, there's only one main operator. Now, he's receiving backup from 2 guys. The first guy is overseeing 23 systems. The second guy is overseeing 25 systems. And that one guy who's overseeing 10 systems in section 3, he's overseeing another 2 in the second box below. The other 3 systems in that section are being overseen by a man who's overseeing 19 systems in total. Now, there's a little bit more nuance to that, but I will show it all when we get to that. But this idea that one person can't do that, it's not really true. Oh, by the way, as far as the OSHA thing goes, we have a DR response from the company where we basically asked, how often do you actually have to go into those enclosed spaces when you do an inspection? And the answer is, you don't. So again, there's a lot more to this issue than what meets the eye. But at a short, basic level, what we want the company to do is to seriously consider, can we save money for customers by bringing these jobs in-house? And what I think you're going to hear, because I'm going to ask staff the same questions, that staff is in total agreement with us, at a minimum, that the company needs to be exploring that option. Now, they came up with a different recommendation. They didn't say disallow it. They said order the company to start doing it. We'll get into that later. But the point here is that staff and OPC is aligned. So that covers what I believe to be the 3 biggest problems with this case. But I want to keep talking just briefly, kind of to touch on what I consider to be the heart of the issue here. And it has to deal with what you heard with all that third-party operator. You see, the thing is, Confluence Rivers isn't like other utilities. Most other utilities in the state have a robust workforce that handles its day-to-day operations, that take care of things like call centers, like having people go out and fix problems, like having people make repairs, like having people build plant. But Confluence isn't. What Confluence is actually is it's more like a a commercial real estate company. It owns the systems, but then it hires third-party people to manage them, to operate them, to do the improvements, to do the call centers. And this is causing some of the problems that you're seeing. You want to know why customers are having so much problem? It's because Confluence doesn't have control over its own call center. It's hiring out that job. And that's why you're getting this feedback that you're hearing from customers who are complaining. They don't have direct control over the quality of service because, again, somebody else is operating the system on their behalf. Somebody else is making the improvements on their behalf. And that is the ultimate issue that we're trying to have addressed. We want this company to improve, to be more like a regular utility. Speaking of customer comments, I want to address one of the bigger ones that you heard a lot of, and a lot of people, I believe it's already been brought up, consolidation. Now, real quick, I want to separate two concepts because I believe Mr. Woodsmall in his opening confused them. There's the consolidation of systems and there's a consolidation of rates. Confluence has already consolidated the systems and we want them to. When you heard stuff about utilities of scale, that's about consolidating the systems. Let's think about it. If I have all my systems under one company and I need to go buy chemicals, I can buy my chemicals in bulk. See? And I can ship it out to my individual systems. That's why you want to consolidate systems. But does consolidating rates give you utilities of scale? No, there's no utilities of scale there. You're just asking everybody to pay the same price. Now, I believe that Commissioner Hahn, you had asked specifically whether or not there were other recommendations. And I will tell you that Jordan Seaver on behalf of OPC did provide several possible options, including some that included either partial or whole consolidation. That wasn't his recommendation, but if you want to learn more about other options for how you could do rates, I strongly recommend that you talk to Mr. Seaver. And on that note, while I'm talking about my witnesses, as far as the NOL issue goes, or sorry, the net operating loss issue, that tax income issue, I strongly encourage that you ask any questions you have to Mr. Riley. He is, as to my knowledge, the only CPA auditor in this building. You probably should listen to what he has to say when it comes to matters of accounting. As far as capital structure, I mean, David Murray is absolutely fantastic. He knows his stuff, and I'll be happy to have you ask any questions you have of there. The OPC has the unique tract of taking a hard look at what actual investors look at when they're considering utility stock. And his uke is a unique one and important for that aspect because we are actually saying, okay, what does the investment community think of these kind of stocks? Also, just because I have to, I'll push out Dr. Mark, just a brilliant man and always good to have answering questions. He's available on a number of different issues, including obviously the third-party contractor disallowance. If you want more information on how we came up with that and how the company can potentially save money, that's the person to ask. But, and I apologize, I kind of got sidetracked there. Back to the issue of consolidation. You heard from customers, they don't want consolidated rates. Now, you were told by Mr. Woodsmall that not consolidating would result in 300 to 400% increases. That's not true. In fact, the company's own testimony demonstrates that the OPC's recommendation results in the smallest increase in terms of, this is a little bit difficult to say because some people have decreases, some people have increases. The OPC just has increases, but our increases are the smallest. In other words, the largest increases are being hit by company and staff. This is much easier to understand if you see the graph, which unfortunately I don't have, but I'll point that out when the issue comes up tomorrow. But at a minimum, listen to the people on this one. They don't want consolidated rates. Just listen to what they have to say. I think that covers just about all of my issues. I genuinely, again, I ask that you ask our witnesses any questions that you have. Do not overthink the tax issue. I'm going to walk through that one slowly and carefully and explain every facet in my opening that really you should be able to walk away from that understanding that one perfectly. And really pay attention to these three major issues. And I'm going to say something contrary to what Confluence said. I do think you need to look at these individually. I appreciate that Confluence has done a good job, but this is not about trying to give the company more money than they need to operate. This is about giving them what they need to operate. And to do that, you need to look at and say, well, how do each one of these individual issues reflect on that? And the answer is they don't need these kind of money to continue operations. They don't need an extra $450,000 in profit because of a tax issue to continue operations. They don't need an 11.35 ROE. This company has the ability to continue operating, and we expect that it will successfully do so without needing the outrageous amounts that the company is now claiming. All right, now, are there any questions that I can help answer?
Yes, Chairman, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Clyde. Appreciate your openings. Always do well. Back to your statement about the ROEs. I did not feel that we were limited to a 1%. I thought it was if there was evidence in the record on which we could come.
I did not want to suggest that you are limited. In fact, it is clearly recognized that you are not limited to the zone of reasonableness. I was bringing it up as a way of describing what the commission in the past has relied upon as sort of a guidepost. You
Okay.
are correct. You are by no means limited to
Just-
a 1%.
All right, just wanted to clarify
And I
that.
apologize if I gave that impression.
No need to. That's why we have follow-up questions. I tried to write as fast as you could, as you were talking.
I've
The
been told
DIF
I-
allowances was $2,000 for the fire hydrants, $30,000 for the smart meters. What were the other two?
Now, I want to be careful here. I am rounding things. Don't quote me for them.
Trust me, I'm not a detailed person.
It is either $20,000 or $22,000 in plants for the fire hydrants. I can't remember the exact number off my head. So if you assume an ROE below 10%, that's where I'm getting to less than 2,000. Similarly, the AMI meters is exactly about 30,000. Dr. Mark's surrebuttal testimony has that, as well as the methodology of how that's computed. What were the other ones?
That's what I was asking you, because I only wrote down the fire hydrants and the smart meters, and I thought you mentioned two others.
So the disallowance of acquisition costs, I want to be completely frank here. I know from the reconciliation that the total amount of rate base disallowed by staff was about $232,000, but I don't actually know what percentage of that was the move from capital to expense and what percentage of that was the disallowance of acquisitions. I think that staff council said the majority of it was the move from capital to expense, so it's probably even smaller than less than 100,000 I said. I would ask a staff witness of
We
that.
can ask the witnesses. That's
Yeah.
good. I just wanted to, and was there one more?
So the fourth one was, again, it's the move from capital to expense. And the thing you have to understand there is you reduce the rate base, but you increase the expense. Again, the total reduction in rate base and staff's reconciliation was, I believe, about 232,000, 236,000. My apologies.
Oh, yeah,
And,
I mean, $1,000.
And the transfer and normalization of maintenance expense is an increase of 448,000. Again, this is the reconciliation filed in the record.
Okay,
So
I can look it up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And if I can jump in maybe to offer a clarification, those two are related, but they're separate. An acquisition cost, the disallowance you're recommending is for that argument of transition versus transaction, and the capital versus expense issue is the accounting categorization.
sure.
Okay.
And yes, so those are separate issues. They're listed as separate issues on the issue list. There is an acquisition issue. The problem is that the effect of those issues in the reconciliation is baked into the reduction to rate base. So unless somebody tells me differently, I'm pretty sure that you're going to find both those numbers baked into that 236,000 reduction. Were there any other questions?
None. Thank you, Mr. Kleiser. I'm going to wait until Mr. Kleiser reaches his seat. I want to stop. I have a couple issues to bring up. The first is I had heard some discussion among the parties about what to do after opening statements. And we're going to our issues with witnesses, or are we perhaps adjourning for the day? I'm just looking for direction.
Your Honor, as you know, we settled a number of issues. We need to get that reduced to writing. Takes a lot of the pressure off of the hearing. What I would like to do, I've talked to staff about this, and I believe Mr. Kleiser kind of agrees with it, but I'm going to let him speak for himself, is I would like the three parties to get together, look at the issues we have remaining. Staff threw out an idea already, but we need to hash through it. with the goal of getting this done next Wednesday instead of next Thursday. So I guess what I'm saying is because of that settlement, I think by taking off the rest of the day, I'm not putting this case at risk of not finishing. So I think we could take off the rest of the day, get the schedule hashed out between the three of us, get that to you. The other thing, I'll be completely frank here, we want to have a discussion with OPC about a couple of their issues. Same thing with staff. Hopefully, by taking the rest of the day off, we may further clean out some issues and reduce the lift on you.
Is there any input from council? Then I think that's an awesome idea. We are not adjourned yet. Everyone, please stay here. I have another question for all of the council. I have commissioners in their offices and myself who prepare for testimony each day. Can you give me a list of the 11 that are settled so I can mark them off? Or
Yeah.
can we start with tomorrow's list?
I can tell you, I'm going to need some help. I don't remember them all. Okay. Thank you. I was just handed it. This, guys, keep me honest. Uncollectible expense, rate case expense. Tomorrow, accounting services. Monday, cell phone and internet reimbursement. Monday, call center expense. Monday, meter testing.
Okay, hold on.
I'm sorry.
Um,
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my
Monday.
gosh. Monday was only cell phone and internet.
okay,
Tuesday, my
Ah.
bad.
Tuesday call center expense?
And meter
Meter
testing.
testing.
Now into Wednesday, payroll and employee benefits. Thursday, capital improvement plan, late fees and depreciation. Guys, am I right? Cool. So as it stands right now, the next 3-4 issues, if you're preparing, would be recommended reports, income taxes, rate design consolidation issue, acquisition related costs, and then timesheets to the extent we don't get those resolved.
And a question, I am not yet of a mind to keep the train running on time, so to speak. So I'm not trying to push anybody forward. However, just to give me an idea, you guys are going to talk about this. Are we thinking that tomorrow's schedule will catch up to where the end of Friday's was? Or are we going to maybe rethink the entire week?
I think that at least one proposal has been put out to rethink things to a degree, but we need to discuss on that aspect.
Ms. Johnson?
Judge, I'm told that questions of this availability require that we take up today.
Okay.
Talk to you. It's that situation.
If I can jump ahead, are you still thinking of then introducing the testimony, the pre-filed testimony? Or I think that's a good idea, Mr. Woodsmall. Any objections coming back at 3:15? I know that's a little longer than 15 minutes. Oh my God. Sorry, Siri's talking too. Okay, to summarize for everyone, we have a witness availability issue.
Tell me what specific staff witnesses that is.
Yes, I don't want to get too far into the details about personnel, since we are not only on the record, but being broadcast live. Let's take a break until 3:15. I'm going to summarize where we're at. We have an issue of witness availability. However, there is discussions of settlement going on. So if the commissioners can please give me your patience, come back at 3:15, and I will be looking to the parties. If things settle and it is just going to be pro forma, send me an email. I will let the commissioners know. Okay? Anything else before I gavel us in recess until 3:15? Nope. Thank you. We are off the record. We are in recess until 3:15.
Commissioner Kochmeyer's here.
Okay, let's go back on the record. We have returned from recess. We have one issue that we are going to cover today, and that is going to be recommended reports. We will do many opening statements, and then we will take witnesses on that issue. On the many opening statements, this is going to be a good opportunity for me to point out the time. And the reason that we are going to this issue today is due to witnesses not being available on other days. So the many opening statements are really meant to give an overview of the issues and not break down what the witnesses are going to testify about. With that said, let's begin opening statements. Confluence.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm kind of winging it today. Mr. Cooper, who was supposed to be the attorney on this, is sick, so you get me instead. The issue of recommended reports in the company's mind is twofold. First off, staff is recommending that we keep a number of reports. The concern there is, think back just moments ago when Mr. Thompson said, we don't trust the company. We have to go in and audit them. We have to go back and we have to look at their invoices. We have to look at the transactions. We have to make sure these costs are associated with Missouri. All the detail of the audit that they have to do. If they have to do all that, what is the point of keeping the report? If they have to go in and look at what the electric cost is for each system, what the chemical costs are, if they have to look at all that native detail, what is the value of a report? It's busy work for the company, it's cost for the company, and it increases rates going forward. Many of these reports are worrisome in that some of them, the staff wants us to keep them and submit them between rate cases. Some of them, the general ledger, providing the general ledger between rate cases is more busy work. It's not simply a matter of turning over a document. It's a matter of scrubbing that document for certain costs that don't flow through to Missouri. It's a lot of work. Staff would be doing this in a rate case anyway. So why incur the costs that will eventually flow through to customers if they're going to look at the native detail anyway? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. We'll move to staff. Any opening?
Yes,
And I do understand that staff has two counsel that will be doing the breakdown of these issues. And Ms. Kerr, if you would, and Mr. Stacy, please state and spell your name for the court reporter because we didn't have that at the very beginning.
sure.
Thank you.
Do you want me to do my opening and then have my witness and then Mr. Stacy do his witnesses, or do you want both of us to do our openings one right after the other?
Now that I have seen, I think what I believe is the organization, let's go ahead and have all the openings taken care of and off the board. Since the other parties didn't split up the issues, I don't want to have Mr. Stacy come in halfway through. And so, excellent. Go ahead, Ms. Kerr. I'm sorry.
Thank you. May it please the commission. My name is Carolyn Kerr, CarolynKerr. And I'm an attorney with the Staff Counsel's Office of the Missouri Public Service Commission. I'm here today to testify for staff will be Paul Amanthor, who will testify about which reports recommended by staff, if any, Confluence should be ordered to maintain and provide to staff and the Office of Public Counsel when requested in future rate cases. The issue before the commission for which Mr. Amanthor will testify is whether Confluence should be ordered to maintain and provide three different types of reports for staff, namely billing and customer account information relating to customer revenue, chemical usage data reporting, and its electrical expense data. These are the reports outlined in the amended list of issues, issue 1A. Staff's position is that Confluence should perpetually maintain certain specific information as outlined on page 15 and 16 of Mr. Amanthor's direct testimony, so it can be readily furnished to staff upon request in order for staff to complete its audit in a timely manner during a rate case. Instead of having to spend unnecessary time working with company staff and weeding through data and invoices, trying to find the relevant information, like they had to do with this case, staff wants the commission to order Confluence to start maintaining the information needed for future rate cases on an ongoing basis now, so that in the future, staff will be able to ask for a report of the data, receive it from the company, and be able to analyze it in a meaningful and efficient fashion. It's Mr. Amanthor's understanding, as his testimony shows, that the information and data the staff requests to be maintained and put into these reports is already being maintained by the company and would not cause it to incur additional labor or expense to compile. Furthermore, not only would maintaining the customer revenue information, chemical usage, and electric expense data aid the staff in its future audits during a rate case, it's good business practice for the company to undertake to keep track of its own costs and expenses on an ongoing basis, regardless of whether it's asking for a change in its rates. It's probably something the company should be doing anyway, in terms of keeping track of its financing, identifying spending trends, budgeting, etc. Confluence argues that it should not have to prepare and maintain the requested reports for staff because the information is already available in its quote native format, and the staff can just review that data when it needs to at the time it audits the company during the next rate case. The company claims that preparing such reports will cost it extra time, effort, and money, which it will have to impose or pass on to its ratepayers because it will have to divert its resources to interpreting and compiling the information and developing and maintaining requested reports for staff, instead of keeping costs as low as possible and concentrating on its business. Confluence argues that staff should simply audit the data at the time of the next rate case, instead of requiring the company to maintain reports or compilations of that information to aid in the process of future rate cases. The problem with Confluence's argument, however, is that the information is already available and maintained by the company. What staff is asking the company to keep track of and report is really not more than what a fiscally responsible company would do anyway. Besides, with the trouble and delay staff and company had obtaining this type of data during this rate case, asking the company to maintain these reports on an ongoing basis so that the information is readily available for future rate cases, it will be helpful for both PSC staff and the company. These reports will make it more likely that the information obtained for auditing and rate-making purposes is accurate and reliable, and that future rate cases will proceed in a smooth and efficient manner. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Are there any commissioner questions? I understand that there were commissioners that were calling in. I'll give that a second. Okay,
Question.
hearing none. Oh, go
No
ahead.
question, no questions, Judge.
Thank you, Commissioner Kolkmeyer. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. And Mr. Stacy.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Your Honor and Commission. May it please the Commission. My name is Scott Stacy, S-C-O-T-T. Last name Stacy, S-T-A-C-E-Y, and I'm counsel for staff. Here to testify on behalf of staff is Jane Doherty and Ashley Sarver. They will be discussing two issues. One of the issues is for the Commission is whether Confluence should maintain a monthly report and be provided in future rate cases to include showing the payment habits of customers. That includes the amounts of actual revenue collected at different time intervals, so this data can be used in lead lag studies. The answer to that question is yes. Staff recommends the Commission order Confluence to maintain a day-to-day collection report by tariff rate district going forward for staff to utilize in future cash working capital lead lag studies. Staff also recommends the Commission order Confluence going forward to maintain all invoices supporting test year costs. Staff further recommends the Commission order Confluence to record the revenue and expense related to primacy fees using a separate minor account designation in order for staff to more easily review and possibly propose adjustments in future rate case proceedings. And staff recommends further that Commission order Confluence to maintain a refund report, including the date, amount, customer name, customer address, and associated water and wastewater system. This will be helpful in assessing the number of refunds being issued and the nature of the refunds should Confluence choose to make future adjustments to its policies and procedures. However, staff is willing to forego that request that the company maintain a refund report so long as Confluence maintains the billing report as discussed in Mr. Amanthor's rebuttal testimony. This issue and recommendations can be found in Ms. Doherty's direct testimony, page 14, 18 through 21, page 16, paragraphs 18 through 20, page 18, paragraphs 5 through 9, and her rebuttal, pages 3 through 5. The other issue is should Confluence provide the Confluence General Ledger, CSWR General Ledger, and allocation percentages with supporting information on a quarterly basis, including between rate cases? The answer to that question is also yes. Staff recommends the commission order Confluence as follows. If a cost is directly incurred and was caused by a specific system within a particular state, CSWR should assign those costs to the appropriate UOC when appropriate and not record direct costs to the CSWR ledger, but rather record them to the ledger at the state level that incurred the cost. The CSWR ledger should include only costs for which the cost cannot be directly associated with an individual UOC or state and must be allocated. In addition, CSR has been and plans to continue acquiring water and wastewater utilities within Missouri as well as in states outside of Missouri. Staff would like to monitor CSWRs and Confluence General Ledger as the acquisitions continue to occur. Staff recommends the commission order Confluence to provide the General Ledger and Confluence General Ledger for quarterly surveillance, as well as order Confluence to maintain reports showing what the monthly allocations are by CSWR and or UOC for each allocation factor. These items will allow staff to monitor to ensure that the systems are acquired, the allocation factors are adjusted accordingly. In conclusion, staff recommends that commission order Confluence to provide the following information on a quarterly basis. A complete detailed transactional general ledger for CSWR, complete detailed transactional general ledger for Confluence, overhead allocation factors by each affiliate with the associated supporting data for each factor, plant and service dollars, number of customer connections, and expense dollars. These issues and recommendations can be found in Ms. Sarver's direct and her rebuttal testimony. Thank you. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any commissioner questions for Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And the Office of Public Counsel.
My book go. That back. It's okay. May it please the commission. I'm going to keep this very short and very simple and sweet. The problem here is that staff basically said, hey, the data that we were getting from the company isn't of the quality necessary for us to complete our audits in a timely and reasonable manner. They had gaps in the information that was being provided, and they had difficulty getting to that information. All this issue is about is your staff telling you, we need you to order the company to maintain data in a manner that we can use to perform our primary function. That's literally all you need to do. The commission clearly has the grant of this power. 393140 sub 4 gives the commission at its discretion the ability to order a company to maintain certain forms of accounts, records, and memoranda. Again, your commission, your staff was having difficulty completing its job because it wasn't getting the information that it needed from what Confluence had supplied. And all it's asking you to do is order the company to provide that information so that in future it can complete its audits in a timely and reasonable manner. Thank you.
Any commissioner questions for Mr. Kleiser? Thank you, sir. If I'm understanding this right, we are going to the company to call its first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Confluence Rivers calls Brent Teese to the stand.
And Mr. Teese, before you sit down, if you would please raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give today will be the truth and the whole truth? Thank you, sir. Mr. Teese has been sworn. Confluence, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you state your name for the record and by whom you're employed?
Brent Teese. I'm employed by CSWR LLC.
And what is your role at CSWR?
I'm a vice president and corporate controller.
And did you cause to be filed in this case direct testimony, rebuttal testimony, and surrebuttal testimony?
I did.
And for your records, those have been marked as exhibits 17, 18, and 19. That testimony was prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes,
Do you have any corrections to make to that testimony?
I do have just one correction in rebuttal testimony. It's minor, but it's on page 21, line 17. The line reads, evidence that CSWR continues to source capital from outside its outside investors. The word outside appears there twice. So you would need to cross out the first instance of that word.
Okay, so would you read line 17 as you are correcting it?
Evidence that CSWR continues to source capital from its outside investors.
Thank you. And with that change, would your answers to the questions posed in exhibits 17, 18, and 19 be the same as they are reflected there?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move for the admissions of exhibits 17, 18, and 19 and tender the witness for cross-examination.
Thank you. You heard the motion to admit exhibits 17, 18, and 19. Are there any objections?
No objection. I missed the page number of it's line
21.
21, line 17. Thank you. No objection.
No objection from staff, Judge.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tender the witness.
For the record, those 3, 17, 18, and 19 are admitted onto the hearing record. The witness has been tendered. We will go first to staff. Any questions of the witness?
Wasn't it your testimony that this information?
Ms. Kerr, I'm so sorry. We have some of the commissioners on WebEx, and due to the audio video setup, yes, thank you. I need you to talk into the microphone. I appreciate it.
Sure. Isn't some of your testimony that some of this information, especially the consumer information, was already available, that you were willing to provide that to the staff?
Are you referring to some of the payment and billing items? Yes. Yes.
So that's not really anything new that staff is asking for.
The piece that's new is the report that relates payments to when the revenue was booked. That's not a report that we can produce natively. So that report in particular would take some extra work to develop. And then I can't even speak today to what it would take to produce that report on a monthly basis. That is not natively available in our billing or accounting systems.
Okay, but you have that information and you had offered to provide it.
We certainly have information about when a customer pays us, but one of Ms. Doherty's reports relates to, and she gives an example of a payment a number of days after the bill was made. And so there's a little bit of nuance there to the particular type of report, and that's not something that we're currently producing. But we do have a report that lists the date that a customer pays us. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to charge late fees and things like that.
Okay, and I guess, are you, I guess I'm referring to Caitlin O'Reilly's rebuttal testimony.
Okay.
Her rebuttal testimony on page 11.
I do not have Ms. O'Reilly's testimony in front of me.
Okay, and she's not testifying, correct?
Your Honor, It's a great point. Let me clear up. I believe what was talked about with the parties, and I think everybody understood this, was that Mr. Teese was adopting Miss O'Reilly's rebuttal testimony. I should have had that marked and I should have moved for that. But I can do that now or after we do the cross-examination, however you want to handle it. But I will get that to you.
And did Ms. O'Reilly have other testimony besides rebuttal?
That was just the rebuttal.
Okay, let's pause here, Ms. Kerr. I would like to recognize Mr. Woodsmall for the sole purpose of moving to enter Ms. O'Reilly's testimony as an exhibit to be adopted by Mr. Teese.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. O'Reilly filed exhibit number 15 rebuttal testimony. Have you reviewed that, sir?
Yes.
And are the answers contained therein correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admission of exhibit 15.
Any objections? Hearing none, it is so admitted.
Thank you.
Purposes of her cross-examination, I've handed the witness a copy of exhibit 15. Thank you for the indulgence, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Kerr.
So then, I referred you to, Ms. O'Reilly's testimony, her rebuttal testimony on page 11, line 18, and I'm sorry, I think I said something, I referred to the, consumer information, but she says that, the information staff seeks would be made available to staff in future cases, with regard to the electric utility invoices from electric utilities.
Mhm.
So isn't Confluence basically agreeing to make those reports available?
The information that the way I interpret that and what we would say is the information that staff has requested is largely, if I remember correctly, if not entirely available on those invoices, and those obviously would be made available during a rate case. So that's the suggestion there. Just
So asking the company to make a report on that isn't really doing anything more than you're already doing.
we don't have a report in the format that, and I don't remember if it was witness Amanthor or Doherty who suggested it. We don't have a report in that format. And so the company's position and my thought was, proper audit procedures, which have been talked about already today, necessarily involve going to the source documentations, which would be the invoices. So, the question of an extra report is extra work. And to your point, we're doing work with those electric invoices already, but there is extra work to be done there.
So isn't it true that CSWR and Confluence already do ledgers on a quarterly basis? That it's not something that you would be doing something new?
Are we talking about electric or are we speaking of general ledgers?
General ledgers?
As requested by Ms. Sarver, yes, we have general ledgers that general ledger is simply where all of the accounting information is collected. And so in our accounting system, that is a report. One of the things to note about that particular report is that we produce a general ledger report in response to a data request, and that didn't have sufficient detail as it comes natively out of our accounting system for staff as they work through service area level expense. That information wasn't always there. So depending on the exact nature of what staff needs as a result of that report, it could take substantial extra work to run multiple reports and combine them, or at the very least, in our experience in this rate case, it wasn't as simple as running the native general ledger report out of our system. More work was needed to get staff the detail that they required for their audit.
And isn't it true that you did not respond to staff's response on reporting in your rebuttal testimony?
Are we speaking of my testimony or Ms. O'Reilly's? Ms. O'Reilly did not file a rebuttal, so we are talking to mine.
Yeah.
Bear with me just a moment. I do not see that in the table of contents. I did not remember, but I do not see that in the table of contents.
I'll withdraw that. Now, isn't it also true that staff did not ask the company to hire anybody to hire additional staff to handle those reports?
Your question is, did staff ask or suggest that we hire someone for those reports?
Right.
They did not.
I don't think I have any other questions right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kleiser.
No
Awesome.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And any commissioner questions? Thank you. The bench does have some questions. And these were going to be directed to Ms. O'Reilly, but since you're adopting her testimony, do you oversee the accounting team?
I do.
And does that include the employees responsible for accounts payable functions?
It does.
Okay. Would it be good practice before paying any invoices on behalf of Confluence to determine that an invoice submitted for payment of chemicals purchased for Confluence includes a description of the chemicals purchased, the quantity, the price per unit, and total price, date delivered, and where delivered?
So the question is, would that be good procedure?
Good practice?
That is not a procedure we have dictated that our accounts payable team perform. And part of the reason for that is we have operations staff who approve those expenses. But if in a different context where the operators were not, operations staff were not approving those invoices, it would be a great procedure, yes.
Does Confluence maintain warehouses for its chemicals?
No,
Does each facility have its own inventory of chemicals?
not that Confluence keeps. There's no inventory on our books, is what I'm saying.
Where are the chemicals kept?
The third-party operators would be responsible for those chemicals.
Does Confluence verify receipt of chemicals prior to paying each invoice?
Again, the responsibility for that would fall with the member of our operations team who's approving the invoices that come either from the supplier or from the third-party operator, should they be responsible to buy those chemicals.
This operations team member, you've mentioned twice that they're approving things. Who do they work for?
They would, they work for Confluence Rivers. They work I'm sorry, work for CSWR. I was trying to think of who they would report to that might be a witness, but they work for CSWR,
Inc. or LLC?
LLC.
But they're not on the accounting team?
No, and our approval structure flows outside the accounting team for all types of invoices. Our attorneys would approve legal invoices and that kind of thing as well.
What's the process for determining when more chemicals are needed?
I do not know that. That would be an operations question. I do not know the answer to that.
What documentation is required before an operator is reimbursed for chemicals that they purchase?
They would be required to submit a receipt of some sort. If the operator purchased it, they would send us their invoice with supporting documentation. That would be a receipt.
Thank you. That's all the bench questions I have. That does take us, though, to recross examination. So we will start again with staff. Do you have any questions on recross? Thank you. And Mr. Kleiser?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And redirect. We do, Mr. Whitsmall.
Thank you, Your Honor. You were asked a number of questions, including questions about electric reports. And so rather than go through every report, let's just start on electric reports and we'll just limit it to that. Do you have Mr. Amanthor's direct testimony?
I do. Give me a moment. Okay, what page?
Page 16. It's the third bullet starting on line 13.
I'm sorry, you said page 13 or page 16?
Page 16,
Line 13.
line 13.
Okay, got you.
Okay, I just want to give the commission an idea of the complexity of this report. So let's start off, name of the system. In Missouri, would you agree that was 68 in this rate case, but going forward, there's more than 68 systems that Confluence Rivers operates. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The system type, water or wastewater, easy enough. The name of the electric provider. Are all Confluence systems served by the same electric provider?
No.
Okay. So Confluence may have systems provided service by Ameren,
Sure.
Evergy,
Sure.
Empire.
I don't know of Empire, but a number of cooperatives.
Okay. Number of cooperatives,
Mhm.
some municipalities.
Mhm.
So we're talking about numerous different electric providers.
Sure.
For 68, 70 different systems. Okay, let's go a little further. The type of asset receiving service for each electric bill, such as lift station, well, lagoon, and treatment plant. Do you see that?
Mhm.
So 70 systems with, let's say, a total of 6 electric providers, and some of these systems have numerous assets. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so Terra-Lac system with a lagoon or 2 lagoons and an oxidation ditch and lift stations and pumps and blowers and aerators. We may have, while one provider, numerous different assets receiving electric service. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they all may be metered separately. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then they ask for, this is the one that really stumps me, so maybe you can find some value in this. Staff asked for the phase of electricity used for each. So for these hundreds, if not thousands of assets across Missouri, they want to know what phase of electricity is used for each. Can you tell me what that even means?
I cannot. I don't know.
Okay, you don't see for a cost to Confluence River for your purposes of doing accounting, controlling the books, you don't see the value of knowing what the phase of electricity is for these hundreds, if not thousands of assets?
I do not.
Okay, this is going to be a lengthy report, is that correct?
I think so, yes.
And it's going to get harder and harder the more systems we add, is that correct?
That's correct.
And If the commission undertakes consolidation, would you believe the need for this type of detail is minimized?
I would, and I believe part of staff's procedure was to create a cost of service for each service area. And so if you're trying to break costs down at that level, you certainly need more detail. But once consolidation happens, some of that detail may not be quite as necessary.
Okay, so if the commission accepts the company's position on consolidation, the need for this detail down to the infinite level is reduced. Is that correct?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. Let's talk about general ledger. You recall some conversation about that?
Yes.
And I've gotten kind of lost, so keep me straight here. Unlike some of the reports, the electric report with all of its detail, that would only be provided in the context of a rate case, as I understood it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, but the general ledger, staff wants you to provide that, what, quarterly between rate cases?
Quarterly, yes.
For what purpose?
I don't know specifically.
And is that work to you, work to the company?
To generate and provide that report. Sure. Yeah.
Can you tell me what's involved in that?
So again, as I was mentioning before, I don't know all the nature of exactly what staff is looking for that, but I know that in this rate case, when we produced the report that's named a general ledger detail report from our accounting system, it was not sufficient. And I understand why, because it didn't have some of the detail of service areas on it. That detail is available in another place in our system, but it involves taking another report and, mapping it sort of Excel magic, right, against that general ledger report to produce something that can give staff all the detail that they needed. So again, to produce that regularly would require more work than simply pressing the go button on a general ledger detail report out of my accounting system.
Okay, and again, you don't see the value of giving that between rate cases because there's no issue involved that staff needs it between rate cases. Is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and help me. Do you submit an annual report on behalf of Confluence River every year?
We do.
And that information, there's information there, financial information and asset information and different costs. Is that correct?
Certain operational information as well. Things like sludge hauling, chemical usage on the water side is in that report.
So we give, pursuant to commission practice, we give the commission certain information every year. What's being talked about here is far and away above those annual reports. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. In the general ledger, staff didn't just want it for Confluence River. Is that correct? They wanted it for the parent company CSR. Is that correct?
CSWR LLC, yes.
So all the work you talked about going into scrubbing and modifying and providing this general ledger in the form that staff wants for Confluence River, multiply it by 2 because you'll have to do it for CSWR as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any other state require that from you?
No,
And so Missouri would be the only state.
correct.
So even though staff said they didn't ask you to employ anybody to do this, there would be cost to you to do this. Is that correct?
Yes,
And the only state that wants you to do it is Missouri. Kentucky, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, no one else asks you to do this. Is that correct?
that's correct.
So there's no employee currently around doing this stuff for other states.
Certainly not this, no.
Okay. And while staff didn't ask you to hire anybody, would this require man hours and costs?
It would require man hours.
Staff include any of those man hours or costs in their revenue requirement here?
No.
You'd have to eat that.
At the beginning, yes, until the next rate case.
Okay. And so if you go 3 years between rate cases, that's 3 years of costs coming off of your bottom line just to provide a report to staff when you don't even have a rate case pending.
Correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. And Mr. Teese, you are excused. Staff, your witness? Our witnesses?
Paul Amanthor.
Thank you. And Mr. Amanthor, if you would please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth and the whole truth today? Thank you. Please have a seat. Ms. Kerr, your witness.
Thank you. Could you please state your name for the record and spell your last name as well?
My name is Paul Amentor. The last name is spelled Amenthor.
And by whom are you employed and what's your position?
Yeah, I'm employed by Missouri Public Service Commission as a senior utility regulator auditor.
Have you prepared and filed testimony in this proceeding, specifically direct testimony on May 26, 2023, rebuttal testimony on June 29th, 2023, and surrebuttal testimony on July 21st, 2023, which have been pre-marked as exhibits 100, 113, and 122?
Yes,
Do you have any changes or corrections to make to any of those documents?
I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions in those documents today, would your answers be the same or substantially the same?
Yes,
And are those same answers true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
yes,
Excuse me. I offer exhibits 100, 113, and 122 into evidence and tender the witness for cross.
Thank you. You have heard the motion of council for the admission of exhibit 100, 113, and 122. Are there any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Hearing none, it is so admitted. The witness has been tendered, and we will go to Mr. Kleiser.
Good evening, Mr. Amenthor.
good evening.
Were you here during the openings?
Yes,
Were you here during the testimony of Mr. Thies?
yes,
Part of the company's position in this case is that the information that you want is already present in source documents. You would agree with me on that?
that's what the company says.
Do you have a copy of your surrebuttal in front of you?
Yeah,
Could you turn to page 5 of your surrebuttal for me, please?
yes.
Oh, sorry. Page 5, lines 21 through 23. You would agree with me that it reads, sometimes the electric bill contains that information and sometimes it does not, as there are multiple electric providers and not a uniform bill format. Some are cooperatives and some are investor-owned utilities. Did I read that substantially correct?
Yes,
You would agree with me that the source document, first of all, you'd agree with me that staff does review the source documents based on that statement, correct?
yes,
And you would agree with me that the source documents that are being provided to staff are not sufficient for staff to make the recommendations that it needs to. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And am I correct in understanding that your position in this case is based on the inadequacy of the source documents that are being provided to you by Confluence?
That's correct.
Jumping around, can you turn to your direct testimony? On page 16, you outlined what the requirements or the report that you were asking for is. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Regarding that fourth bullet point, so starting at line 13, why, I want to ask this as an open question because I'm genuinely curious, so I'm just going to ask, why is staff seeking the phase?
Or about like the phase of the electricity used for each system.
Yeah,
We ask the information in case they have a new equipment, like a new pump machine or blower. And then based on the information, we can properly or accurately analyze the electric expense. So, I mean, if like the electric rate change, we can use that current rate to annualize the electric expense.
so based on your response, you would agree with me that the phase electricity would have a direct cost impact.
Yes,
Is the number of assets using electricity expected to change frequently? well, you would agree with me that the number of assets using electricity in a system would not change frequently.
That's correct.
So you would agree with me that once the company prepares a report for a system with the number of assets, it's highly unlikely that report would need to change frequently on that issue.
That's correct.
Would you agree with me that the consolidation being requested by the company would minimize the need for the data that you're requesting?
I can speak to that.
You can't speak to that? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Fair enough. I don't think that your testimony touched the general ledger. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Then I will skip the general ledger questions. You are not receiving sufficient information to complete your audit based on what's in the annual report alone. Is that correct?
What do you mean by the annual report alone?
Well, let's start with, you agree that the company files an annual report every year, correct?
That's, I mean, I believe so.
And would you agree with me that that annual report does not supply the information that you require related to, for example, electricity or chemical expenses for you to complete your audit?
That's correct.
So, all right, one last thing I forgot, turn back to your sir rebuttal. Page 6. Lines 15 through 17. You would agree with me that it reads, if more than 1 year of a chemical is purchased, staff does not know over how many years to normalize that cost, as staff does not know how much is used, how long a quantity purchased lasts without the historical information. Would you agree that I read that substantially correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And once again, you would agree with me that that means that staff is not receiving the information it needs to properly perform its audit based on what the company is currently able to provide.
That's correct.
And once again, you would agree with me that the basis of your recommendation is the lack of the information that you are currently receiving in those reports.
That's correct.
I have no further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Woodsmall.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let's just stick with electric report. We've talked a lot about that. And I want to figure out what exactly you want. Okay, let's say we have a system. Have you heard of tear to lack?
Yes.
Do you know the complexity of tear to lack?
I don't know, but I know they have like a six. I mean, look at the electric expense. I think they have like a 6 different providers for their system.
6 different providers for
Yeah.
just this one system.
Yeah.
Okay, and multiple different assets, blowers and pumps and aerators and everything else. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Just so I understand, let's say we have an electric feed coming in from XYZ electric provider, okay? And it's coming in at one phase. Is that make sense?
Yeah.
What are the different phases of electricity?
I believe there's 1 and 2 or 3.
1, 2, or 3?
Yeah.
Okay. You
Yeah.
don't know though?
I mean, I'm not sure, but based on some of the bills, I see like a phase 1 and a phase 3, something like that. But I'm not sure.
Okay, but you want that information
Yes.
because what you're going to do is take the number of phases, go to the electric provider's tariffs and try to price that out and determine if the bill is correct?
No, that's not what we.
Okay, so why do you need the phases?
I mean, like I said, if you guys put a new equipment like a new pump or new blower, and just looking at the history of the electric expense, if the expense fluctuate a lot, that can explain like there's something going on, and based on the information, we can ask the company if they have like new equipment, so we can base that information to annualize the electric expense.
Okay,
And like I said, if there is a electric price change, like if there's change in electric rates, we can also take that into consideration when we analyze the electric expense.
Okay, so you are going to use the phase so that you can check for rate increases and annualize it. Is that correct?
That's correct. If
Okay, that's all I needed. So you're not going to take this report at face value. You're not going to take the invoice at face value. You are then going to go to the phase for thousands of different assets, price them out at the rate, and then calculate electric expense. Is that correct?
I mean, that's not correct because like I said, if we notice through the invoice, the history of that electric expense, if we notice like there's a lot of fluctuation, like up and down in the cost, or the cost just keep going up, I mean, that can explain like, that can explain like the cost is going up. So when we're gonna propose like annualize that cost, we might just take the last known. But that's just based on the history. It's not like we can just take the bill and reprice everything. I mean, with the time constraint we have to work on it, there's no way we can do that. So that's not what we are asking for.
And I agree with you totally, that at some point, you're just going to take the invoice at face value. That's all you can do. Isn't that correct?
I mean, that's some ways correct, but what we have in this case, like we asked for the electric invoices, and there are so many invoices the company didn't provide to us in this case.
You didn't know how to find them, and you didn't ask how to find them. Is that correct? Did you end up finding them?
What was your question?
Well, he was saying he didn't get invoices. And I haven't even asked a question about that till just now.
And what's your specific objection? What was asked and answered? I'm not sure. Go ahead, Mr. Witzmal. Objection overruled.
Okay, well, let's just move on to something else. Let's say we have a system as complex as Terre de Lac with numerous lift stations and pumps and blowers and aerators, okay? Let's say we have several different pieces of equipment that come in at three phase. Can you picture this? Comes in to a meter at three phase. Then it comes off and there's a transformer that reduces it to single phase to go to multiple pieces of equipment. We get a bill for $100 for that meter for a month. How do you want us to break that down to each individual asset and by phase?
I mean, nobody asked that information though. It's not in my it's not in my testimony. We didn't ask you guys to break that down by phases.
Look at page 16 of your direct testimony, line 17, and the phase of electricity used for each. And if you want to change your answer to clarify what you're looking for in this report, we'd love to hear it, because this is where part of our problem is the confusion.
The reason why we asked the information is because we didn't get it in this case.
I understand, but I'm trying to get at what you want in this report.
What we want in the report is just a general information. We just want, to keep the electricity bills, and the general information has to have like the name of the system type, the name of the electricity provider, the number of bill of each system, the assets that is receiving the electric service.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to get at. We have an electric line coming into a meter. That's 3-phase. And that serves 10 different assets, but it serves 2 assets at 3-phase, comes through a transformer and serves the other 8 assets at single phase. How do you want me to break down that bill to tell you which assets it serves and at what phase for each asset? Or if you want simply just what is the electric bill for that month, much different. I can't figure out how to do this report he wants. But he wants it by asset and by phase, and it's impossible to do. And that's what I'm testing him on. I'm asking him, how would you like us to do this report?
Okay. Mr. Amanthor was in the middle of giving his answer when Mr. Whitsmall interrupted with comments about phases. Mr. Amanthor, you were stating that you wanted, and I'm going to read off your testimony because that's what you were answering, if I was listening correctly. You wanted the name of the system type, the name of the electric provider, the number of bills at each water and wastewater system, the type of asset receiving service for each electric bill. And that's where you ended off.
Yes.
So you
Did
know,
you-
I'm sorry.
Did you have more answer to that?
No.
So you no longer need the phase because he didn't include that.
You know, the phase information you're talking about is on the bill. So once we get that bill, the information is on the bill.
So you're going to go to the bill. You don't need that in the report because you're going to look at the bill anyway.
Yeah, we just need a bill because, you know, we
Okay,
asked,
you just
we
need the
asked the
bill.
information in this case, we didn't get that, you know, there's a ton of missing electric invoices.
So
We didn't
bottom line, what you want is us to do a better job of getting you the bills in the next case.
Yes, and also to
Other
keep,
questions?
I mean,
Thank you.
We'll move to bench questions. Are there any commissioner questions? The bench does have a few questions. Mr. Amanthor, can you finish your answer that you were just giving to Mr. Whitsmall?
Okay, I was just gonna add that since Confluence is growing very quickly, they need to keep that information. So when we need it, they can provide that information to us in the future cases.
Thank you. I do have a few other questions for you. I'm going to reference your direct testimony. Page 12. And I'm looking at lines 6 through 8, that sentence. I'm going to read the sentence out loud for the record and for those in the room. But Mr. Amanthor, my question is going to be, can you explain what you mean by the end of that sentence where it says this would be considered a donation? Here is the full sentence. Quote, staff reviewed electric invoices from October 2019 through January 2023 and removed any late payment fees and rounded up bill amounts as this would be considered a donation. Can you tell me, Mr. Amanthor, what you mean by the end of that sentence?
Yeah, when we look at a conferences bill, there is a session there, like they have like they give like some type of donation, and
Who, the customers or the company is giving the donation?
it's the company. It's like when you see that on that bill, that's a roundup.
Okay, so this is a similar situation to, I think McDonald's is very famous. They ask you to round up other businesses, just local, regular businesses, I mean, not monopoly, ask you to round up for donations. And so Confluence Bills has a similar type of question to its customer? Do you want to round up for such and such charity?
It's not question to customer, but it's on the electric bills. So it's like, maybe the electric company just ask them like if they can round out. So it's not invoices to like customers, but it's just like invoices they are getting from the electric providers.
The bills
From the
from
electric
the
providers.
utility
yeah,
company's
yes,
electric company?
Yeah,
Okay. And Confluence has been rounding up its electric bills?
yes.
My next question is page 13. This is about the chemicals. Direct, page 13. And I'm looking for a sentence, line 6. Okay, I'm going to read the sentence and then I'm going to ask the question. But I'm going to give you the question first so you can think about it while I'm reading for everybody else.
Okay.
The question is, when the operators purchase the chemicals, were you able to review the invoice to reconcile the reimbursement requested by the operator? So let me go back to the sentence that leads into that question. Line 6, page 13, Mr. Amanthor's direct testimony. Quote, during its review process, staff noticed missing quantities on some invoices, such as when operators purchased the chemicals and that some invoices had bulk quantities of chemicals or total invoice amounts split between multiple systems without any explanations or rationale for how the amount was allocated. So based on that sentence, Mr. Amanthor, my question, were you able to reconcile the chemical purchase and the reimbursement by the chemical operator, the reimbursement that was requested by the operator?
That's not something as specifically when I look at the chemical invoices. I don't look at the reimbursement. How much they reimburse the company, I don't look there.
Were you able to track the chemical purchases? Did you ever figure out how they allocated the amounts that they did for the chemical purchases?
No.
Okay. My last question. Is it your testimony that during your review of those chemical invoices, that you found some invoices that did not include the specific quantity and type of chemicals or where the chemical was delivered to? I'm sorry, that was a really long question. Do I need to rephrase that?
During my review, we see the invoice, how much they purchase, like the chemical, but we don't know how they use that chemical. We don't know how often they buy that chemical, and we don't know like how they allocate the invoice total to multiple systems. So they don't have any track of like the chemical usage. When we ask that information, they say the company doesn't track their chemical usage information. So staff was unable to accurately analyze the chemical expense because we don't have any information about like how many quantity we have to build in this case, because we don't know how they use it, how long they use it. We don't have any information or that kind of information. So we didn't, staff was unable to accurately analyze the chemical expense.
Thank you. That ends the bench questions. Before I go to recross, I want to point out to everyone, it is a few minutes after 5 o'clock. So if anyone needs to arrange pickups for their offspring or arrange other meetings with friends and family, this is going to be that time. Also, if anyone is unable to stay after 5, please let me know. Madam Court Reporter, are you doing okay? Awesome. Let's go back to cross examination. Mr. Kleiser.
No questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, Mr. Woodsmall. Thank you. And that takes us to redirect.
So would a report help you reconcile or track that chemical purchase, for example?
Yeah, I mean, the chemical usage log will help us to know like how much chemical they use at each system, how long they use that chemical. And that's also gonna tell us if there are some chemical that they may not use anymore. So once it comes to annualize the chemical, we can accurately do that. So the chemical, we need that chemical log, usage log information to annualize the chemical expense.
In your opinion, is that something that a company should be doing on their own?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good business practice to know how much chemical they use at each system. That will help them to keep track of the costs. That's gonna help them for their planning and budgeting. So it's something they should be doing anyway.
And the same go for the, with the same, go for the keeping track of the electrical expense reports and their uh, consumer billing.
I mean, the same goes to the electric expense, but when it comes to the billing,
Revenue reporting.
yeah, hold on, I mean, for the billing issue, what we have in this case is like they provide us with 3 different formats of billing report information. So that make it really hard on staff to compile all those data to analyze the revenue accurately. So they need to provide the billing information in the way staff want so that can, assist us in the net case.
Now, Mr. Woodsmall had asked you, had gone into a lot of detail about the needing to know about the electric phase. You're asking for the electric phase for the electric account, right?
We just looking for the general information, about the electric bills, if
Okay.
they can just provide the bills, and on the bill, they have all the information. So it's not like we are not asking the company to log in like phases information from each type of, the bill and give that report to us. That's not what we are asking the company.
So you're asking it by electric account.
Yeah, we just want them to provide the information on, each, when you look at, like on each bill, they have the information we are looking for. So it's now, we just want them to have it by electric account, but not to the electric account, the provider, the access who is receiving the service.
Okay, so you don't need to know it by each specific asset, what phase it is.
We are not asking the phase information.
And that's so you can know the proper tariff rate, annualize it.
Yeah, like I say, if there is a new equipment, if they have like a new machine, when we look at the electric expense history, how that price, the expense fluctuates, based on that, we can, know how much we can put in the rate.
Okay.
So that's
Said
why,
that, sorry.
that's why we need information.
Okay, and you said that information is right there on the bill.
The problem we have, like I said, in this case, they didn't provide those bills to us. We asked them, we went through like informal meeting, weekly informal meeting with the company to get those invoices. They just say, we're gonna get it to you. They never provide that information. So that's the whole problem with, this issue, the reporting issue, is because they never provide us the information.
And as a company, they should be getting this information.
They get a bill from the provider, so they should have all the information. And they log all those information in their system. So it's something they should be able to provide us.
Okay.
So they didn't provide us in this case, that's why.
Don't have any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Amanthor. Mr. Amanthor, you are excused. I appreciate your testimony. Staff, call your next witness. I believe it is Ms. Doherty.
Staff calls Jane Doherty.
Am I pronouncing that correctly? Ms. Doherty, please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth and the whole truth today?
Sure do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Staff, your witness.
Thank you, Judge. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Jane C. Doherty, Jane. Last name is Doherty, Dhority.
And by whom are you employed?
The Missouri Public Service Commission.
And what is your position there?
I'm a senior utility regulatory auditor.
Have you prepared and filed testimony in this proceeding?
Yes, I have.
Specifically, direct testimony filed on May 26, 2023, set forth in Exhibit 103,
Yes, I have.
and rebuttal testimony filed on June 29, 2023, and set forth in Exhibit number 115.
That's correct.
And finally, sir, rebuttal testimony filed on July 21st, 2023, public and confidential, set forth in exhibit number 125.
That's correct.
Do you have any changes or corrections to make to these documents set forth in exhibits 103, 115, and 125?
I do not.
If I were to ask you to save questions in these documents today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Are those questions and answers true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Your Honor, I offer states exhibits 103, 115, and 125, public and confidential, to be admitted into evidence.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the admission of Exhibit 103, 115, and 125? No objections. They are so admitted onto the hearing record.
Staff tenders Ms. Doherty for cross-examination.
And Mr. Kleiser.
Good evening, Ms. Doherty. Do you have a copy of your rebuttal testimony in front of you?
I do.
Can you turn to page 5 for me?
Can.
I'm going to read lines 5 through 9. I want to make sure that I'm reading it correctly. Collection lag report would include data regarding how long it takes Confluence's customers to pay their bills. Much slower. Got it. Trying to hustle. A collection lag report would include data regarding how long it takes Confluence's customers to pay their bills, which in turn helps determine the timing of cash flow that is needed to determine the revenue lag in a cash working capital lead lag study. In this case, staff had to use a surrogate collection lag as the company did not have the data staff required to calculate Confluence's collection lag. Did I read that substantially correct?
You did.
Is my understanding correct then that the reason that you are requesting the information in the report is to allow you to perform the collection part of the lead lag study in
Correct.
future? And just for the sake of everything, a lead lag study is a study designed to understand the timing of payments and collections. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes.
And it's necessary to look at the timing and collections over multiple months, over multiple periods when performing such a study, correct?
Correct.
And that is why you are requesting the collection information over multiple months. Is that correct?
Correct.
And as you say in this testimony, in this case, the information that was provided by the company was not sufficient, correct?
Correct.
And you had to resort to using surrogate data, correct?
Correct.
So again, just to finalize, the purpose of your recommendation is to allow you to have the data you need in future to complete this study without having to rely on surrogate data. Do I have that correct?
You do.
You did not touch the general ledger. That's
No.
Sarver.
Sorry. Correct.
Then I'm done.
Mr. Woodsmall.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be very brief. Do you have your rebuttal testimony in front of you?
I still do.
Okay, page 5, lines 11 through 13 roughly, and I'm not going to ask you to read it out loud or anything. I just want some clarification. At the very beginning of line 13, well, continuing back to line 12, once the report is set up, this report can be updated intermittently. Term is a little vague. How often do you want this report updated? What do you
It
mean
doesn't
by
have to be
intermittently?
monthly.
Monthly?
It does not have to be monthly.
So how often, what is intermittently then?
Every,
Quarterly?
that would work.
So quarterly would work? Okay, and briefly, you say line 11, while staff recognizes that Confluence may incur additional time and possibly cost. Do you see that?
I do.
And did you make any allowance in the revenue requirement in this case for this additional cost?
No.
Okay, so if the commission ordered that imposed on Confluence River would have to eat that cost until the next rate case?
Correct.
Okay. So our profit level coming out of this case would immediately be less because we're incurring additional costs. It's not in the revenue requirement.
Correct.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there any commissioner questions for Ms. Doherty? Okay, the bench does have a few questions. On page 4 of your SIR rebuttal, you had explained the need for actual revenue or day-to-day collection reports to understand the payment habits of customers.
Correct.
Would these reports need to be separated by rate class or rate district?
I don't know.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Um, yes. We would like to have it separated, like residential, non-residential.
Okay. How would that? Why would staff like it separated in that manner?
It's all in, so we can calculate the collection lag for the lead lag study. Sufficient detail.
Do other utilities in Missouri maintain this information?
They maintain information that we can use to generate a collection lag. And Confluence does not maintain that information.
Is cash working capital still an issue in this case?
I don't believe so.
On page 9 of your SIR rebuttal, you stated that the positive working capital requirement is $27,703.
Correct.
That's line 14. Is that water and sewer combined?
Yes.
And then Mr. Teese's direct testimony, and that's page 15 and 16. But that indicated that using the 45-day convention that Confluence has calculated, its positive water working capital requirement to be 112,722 for water, and for sewer, $186,385. And I'm sorry, long setup. Has Confluence accepted staff's total company amount of 27,703?
I believe so.
Okay. That is all the questions from the bench, but stay there, we have more. That takes us to, we are getting punchy late in the day, I apologize. That takes us to recross examination, and I believe, yeah, Mr. Kaiser.
I have no questions, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woodsmall. Thank you, and that takes us to redirect.
I think I have just one question, Judge. Do we know for sure that it would cost any additional monies for them to do these reports that
We
you're
don't
asking
know that.
for? Okay, nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. And Ms. Doherty, you are excused from the stand. I appreciate you being here. I got everybody, right? Yeah. Yes, thank you. Staff, your next witness, I believe, is Ms. Sarver.
State calls Ashley Sarver.
Ms. Sarver, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth and the whole truth today during your testimony?
Yes.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Staff, your witness.
Thank you, Judge. Would you please state and spell your name for the record?
Ashley Sarver, ASHLEY. Last name is SARVER.
And by whom are you employed?
Public Service Commission,
And what is your position there?
Lead Senior Utility Regulatory Auditor.
Have you prepared and filed testimony in this proceeding?
Yes,
Specifically, direct testimony filed on May 26, 2023, public and confidential? as set forth in Exhibit 107.
Yes.
Sir, rebuttal testimony filed on July 21st, 2023, public and confidential, set forth in Exhibit 131.
Yes.
Now, do you have any changes or corrections to make to those documents set forth in Exhibits 107 or 131 respectively?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, I've handed you a document entitled Staff Errata Sheet Confidential, remarked as Exhibit or Staff's Exhibit 133. Does that include your changes
Yes, it
to your
does.
documents? And specifically paragraph or number 3, Exhibit 107, which is your direct testimony. Is that correct?
Yes.
Header on the title page, delete May 11, 2023, and replace it with May 26, 2023.
Yes.
Okay. And then again, in number 6, Exhibit 131, your sir rebuttal testimony, that should say page 5, lines 26 through 29. And you want to delete no, as Mr. Cox has shown on page 33 of his rebuttal testimony. The corporate allocation for Missouri is 7.99%. Therefore, 7.999% of these executive salaries and benefits and recommend for disallowance by staff in this case, not 100%. The remainder of executive salaries and benefits are recovered from other states in which CSWR operates. You want to remove that, correct?
Yes.
And you want to replace it with no, staff is removing the Missouri portion in the test year for CSWR executive salaries and benefits. CSR used an allocation percentage of 7.99% for executive salaries. Therefore, the commission accepts CSWR's allocation factor. CSWR can recover the remaining 92.01% of executive salaries and benefits from other states in which CSWR operates.
That is correct.
All right. Staff offers the errata sheet as listed as Exhibit 133 into evidence, which to be used later for the other direct testimonies of other staff members, if you want to do it that way.
I haven't done this as an exhibit.
That's fine. I just,
Let's see where we're at.
Okay.
I don't think I have any issues with this. But let's see where we're at
but
first.
there is a portion on that. It is confidential, and that's on paragraph 1.
Yes, and I see that. First, let's take Ms. Sarver's testimony. I'm pretty sure I heard Mr. Stacy offer Exhibit 107.
I have not yet.
Okay,
The staff offers states or staff's exhibits 107 and 131, public and confidential, will be admitted into evidence.
okay, let's go ahead and take just those two. I am not talking about the errata sheet. Are there any objections to the admission of Exhibit 107 or 131? Hearing none, it is so admitted onto the hearing record. Next, we have offered Exhibit 133. This is marked as the staff errata sheet confidential, and it is being offered as an exhibit. Are there any objections or other commentary?
Your Honor, we'll get an opportunity to cross those other witnesses, so I don't have.
Okay, no, then great. Exhibit 133 is admitted onto the record as confidential Exhibit 133. Mr. Stacy, your witness.
And staff tenders Ms. Sarver for cross-examination.
Mr. Kleiser.
Good evening, Ms. Sarver.
Good evening.
Apologize for mispronouncing your name earlier, by the way.
Do you have a copy of your sir rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I do.
Can you turn to page 27? Let me know when you're there.
Okay, I'm here.
On page 9 through 13, there's two sentences I'd like to read, make sure that I'm actually reading them correctly. Staff will be able to monitor overall CSWR costs and how they change through review of the CSWR general ledger, as well as the amount eventually recorded in the Confluence general ledger. This allows staff to see the entire bucket of costs to be allocated at CSWR and the portion that is recorded in the Confluence general ledger, as these should change as further acquisitions are made, whether in Missouri or another state. Did I read that substantially correct?
Yes, you did.
So let's just make sure some things are clear for the record. CSWR in this, I'm sure you specified earlier, but that's Central States Water Resources. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And because I think the judge might want me to, do you know whether that's CSWR LLC or Central States Water Resources, Inc.?
LLC.
Okay, thank you. So now back to the actual substance. Based on this reading, am I correct to understand that staff had difficulty developing the proper corporate allocation used in this case due to a lack of information provided by Confluence Rivers?
We had to ask for several work papers to come up how they came up with their allocation, but not really the allocation percentage.
Is the information that you are requesting beneficial? You would agree? Am I correct to understand that the information you are requesting is meant to benefit the staff in being able to develop corporate allocation factors in future?
Correct.
And I'm not going to read it, but starting at the paragraph starting at page 2 through 6, you discuss the rapid change in affiliate. I'm sorry, I'm still on page 27 of your sir rebuttal, to be clear. Again, lines 2 through 6, you discuss the rapid change in the affiliate group of Confluence Rivers.
Lines 2 through
6.
coming from Josiah Cox's rebuttal.
Fair enough. But the issue at hand is the rapid change in the affiliate group of Confluence Rivers, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And that rapid change am I correct in understanding that rapid change in affiliate group is what is prompting staff to request this information on a quarterly basis?
That is correct.
So by having this information on a quarterly basis, staff believes it will be better able to understand the proper allocation of corporate overhead costs from CSWR LLC to Confluence Rivers in future rate cases.
Yes.
And I apologize, that was a long question. But I'm pretty sure I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Woodsmall.
Very briefly, on the corporate allocation report, first off, let's start at a high level and work down. That the staff did not take exception with the formula that CSWR uses to allocate. The formula, is that correct?
The method that is used, we did not have a problem with.
Okay. The only problem was the availability of data to calculate that on a quarterly basis. Is that the issue?
Just how the cost itself came down to Missouri. It was hard to determine what the cost was that came down to Missouri, just by reviewing the journal ledgers.
Okay. Well, let me back up. I think I jumped ahead. So no issue with the formula. The company updates the allocation factor quarterly. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you don't have a problem with that being updated quarterly. You're not asking for it more frequently.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So the allocation manual, the allocation process is okay. You had some problems seeing how it applies to the cost. Is that what you're saying?
The corporate allocation sheet that you keep talking about that you're supposed to do, that you guys do every quarter, that was fine. I just want that like it is.
Okay,
Then the journal ledger, I would like to have that too along with it.
okay. Now, the allocation report that's calculated quarterly, you want that calculation to be given to you in the future rate case?
Every quarter and then plus in the future rate case.
Oh, you want it submitted between cases?
This one I do, yes. So we can watch the acquisition, since you guys are rapidly growing, to watch what the allocation factor does.
Okay. In this case, you use the allocation factor calculated as of December 31st. It was the latest one that was done, correct?
Well, then I added South Carolina.
Okay,
But yes,
okay. So you use the latest calculation for the allocation factor. Is that correct?
yes, in this case.
Okay. So what happened historically was disregarded in favor of the most recent number. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't say that. The reason we want it, or I want it, is to just to watch the allocation factor itself. Because obviously a couple of years ago, it was a lot higher than it is now.
Mhm.
So if you guys don't come in for a rate case for another 3, 5, 10 years, and if the allocation factor changes, then that would be, that could possibly be a problem.
How would it be a problem?
I mean, if the allocation factor drops down to, less than, to a lot less number, and that cost coming down to Missouri customers.
Isn't that good? Less money coming to Missouri, being charged to Missouri?
But the number still built into rates is still the higher number.
Okay, so how would you use this report between cases? Is it just more curiosity to monitor the company?
No, is more if you need to file a complaint or something against the company possibly, or if we have questions on it, we could ask you, ask you guys questions about it too.
Okay. You mentioned a complaint, an earnings complaint?
I mean, possibly. Oh.
Okay. Do you realize the company operates at a loss every quarter?
I'm not saying that that'll be the issue.
So if it's not to determine the possibility of an earnings complaint, and given the company is operating a loss, I can't believe it's that. What is the purpose? Not in a future case. Certainly willing to give it to you in a future case. What is the purpose of the report between cases?
We're just want to make sure that the allocation factor didn't dramatically change.
And if it did, so what? If we make a lot of acquisitions in Texas, which reduces the allocation in Missouri, if we're operating in a loss, what's it matter to you?
Because if you're coming in at less, if you're coming in at, like 3%, way less than your 7.99 that you want, then you want to, and maybe have you guys come in for, maybe, I don't know if we can suggest you guys come in for a rate case or just ask.
You might use this so you could ask the company to file a rate case?
No, we can't ask you guys to, but we can just, it's just another form so the customers won't get, the customers are paying their fair price.
In conjunction with this, are you going to look at increases in other costs to see if there's offsetting factors?
We
Or is
possibly,
this just going to be looked at in a vacuum?
we'd probably look at the 3 factors that go into it.
Okay. Having trouble understanding the value between rate cases, but I think I've gotten as far as I'm going to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any commissioner questions for Ms. Sarver? Okay, hearing none. The bench does have a couple questions. You do not need to reference your testimony. However, my question is going to reference your testimony so that everyone listening can follow along. Your direct testimony, Schedule 1, which talks about your experience and your case participation. That schedule indicates that you were responsible for the chemical expense issue in the last 3 Missouri American Water Company rate cases. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Second question. Is the reporting of chemical expenses that staff is recommending, and we heard Mr. Amanthor testify about that, is what staff is recommending for the chemical expenses different than what is required or provided by Missouri American?
No, at Missouri American, the information that they provided was sufficient enough to do the audit.
Did they break down their chemical expenses by system portions? Did they track the chemicals by how often they purchased? I'm trying to think of some of the other items that Mr. Amanthor mentioned in his testimony, but he mentioned a lot of that tracking of the chemicals so that the cost could be associated at a later time with each system. Now, I understand that Confluence is talking about 60+ systems that are separate right now, but Missouri American is tracking something similar, are they not?
Yes, they are.
Can you explain a little bit further about how Missouri American is tracking their chemicals?
From what I remember, I'm trying to think of what my work paper looked like. They had it by they had it broke down even by the system that they have. And then they had the quantity of it, the pounds, if it's tons or by pounds. They had the number, like how many of that. I don't know if they broke it down by month, I believe.
And when you say by system, Missouri American Water, in my mind, is one large system. Are you referencing the legacy systems? Kind of like if we would look ahead to Confluence, their request would be that we have one consolidated rate, and we might be looking or calling these their legacy systems. Is that how Missouri American was tracking it when
They-
you say it's system?
Yes, whenever I reviewed it, I actually was able to identify which location that chemical went to.
Okay, thank you. My verbiage fails me. That is all the questions I have. But that does take us to recross Mr. Kleiser.
Very briefly, because you were asked questions regarding the chemical situation, my understanding from Mr. Amanthor's testimony, yes, Mr. Amanthor's testimony was that he needed chemical usage. Did Mock break down or provide information on chemical usage?
From what I can remember, they did.
Okay. That was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, and that takes us to the company. Thank you. That takes us to redirect.
All right, thank you, Judge. You're asking for the general ledger for Confluence and CSWR, is that right?
That is correct.
And they already do that, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you want that on a quarterly basis?
Yes.
Now, do you expect them to have any additional cost by doing that?
No.
Did you ask Confluence to hire someone to do reports to make your job easier?
No.
All right, you mentioned about using that information to filing a complaint. What would staff look at in filing a complaint? Would it only be the allocation factors?
No, the journal ledger would help us out. But that's not our, the journal ledger would help us out. But we're not wanting this information to file a complaint on them. We don't want the information for us to have.
And why is it important to know the allocation factors?
Just to see if it would drop or if it would increase, perhaps either direction.
Is it important to ratepayers?
Yes.
Isn't it true that, or would you look at more than just the allocation factors if you would look at everything if there was a complaint actually filed?
Oh, for sure, yes.
Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. Ms. Sarver, you are excused. I appreciate your being here to testify today. Let's take a minute to do a quick status check. First, council, are we coming back in at 9 a.m. tomorrow?
We haven't had an opportunity to talk anymore. We were gonna do that. We ended up doing this, not to be crass, but, so I believe, given the number of issues that have been announced or settled, that we need to document. As I mentioned, I think we have a resolution, certainly with public counsel, we need to get staff's buy-off on 2 additional issues. I think we've taken a lot of pressure off the schedule. I think we're not talking about going long, we're talking about shortening the case. I would prefer to give us opportunity to meet in the morning to see if we can nail down further settlement and get a status report on that. I would like for us to meet at 9. Can we give you a status report at 10:30?
And what would be your vision then for when we reconvene?
Net operating losses. If we need to reconvene, that's where we would start.
Okay, that's issue, what I have is number 4, income taxes.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
And do you want, meet at 9, hour and a half? Yep, not me. You guys meet at 9, 10:30-ish. Email me, hey, we're doing great, or we're not. Are we then talking about coming back in to the courtroom at 1?
I would prefer much earlier.
I would hope that we may let you know at 10 o'clock saying it's not going well. We're going to start the hearing with income taxes at 10:30.
I
10
would,
o'clock. 10 o'clock.
I would concur. I think that we can probably tell you by at least 10 whether or not we need to take up income taxes that day. And if we do, I think we could probably start it by at least 10:30 or
Staff concurs.
Okay, and just to make sure, because I'm going to get asked as well, if we finish taxes, income taxes, if you all take it off of the table, are we then following the amended schedule, i.e. rate design district consolidation,
Yes, Your Honor.
and then acquisition related costs?
Correct.
And I can't see us going too much further on Friday, but timesheets if we get there. Okay. So let us set a time for 10:30. The judge asks question mark.
We'll have an update before 10:30.
but yes, we should set a time for 10:30.
Yeah, I like to set a permanent time, make sure everybody is ready to go. And then we can figure out if we need more or less, not less. 10:30, no objections,
No
last call. Excellent. Let us adjourn until 10:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you all for your patience, for your staying late, especially our technical staff and court reporter. This was unplanned and I really appreciate the help. Thank you all. We're off the record.